Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our online webinar by the Lloyds Register Foundation Heritage and Education Centre. And we, like many other organisations, have gone online to bring our collections to you in this very strange time of lockdown and post-lockdown around the world. So as some of us start to emerge from our homes more frequently, firstly, I hope that you're all safe and well, wherever you may be. My name is Louise Sanger. I'm the Applied Research and Outreach Manager for the Foundation. And I'll just try and move my slide on. Let me see. There we are. So our Heritage and Education Centre, we also call it HEC, and we would like to share with you today some highlights from our collaborative projects with other organisations, a little bit about our history and our plans, and some useful information about our online resources. So hopefully some of this will be helpful for your research, or perhaps just of general interest to pass the time. If you've got any questions while I'm talking, please do send them through on the questions option, or you can also give Charlotte a quick email, and I'll endeavour to answer these at the end of my talk. And I've got some helpful bunnies behind the scenes as well who may be able to help answer questions in between. So why Shoreline? Well, I pondered the title for some time. Should I go with coastline or foreshore or seashore or any other number of combinations? Well, in contrast to a coast, a shore can border any body of water, while the coast must border an ocean. So I settled on shoreline being the place where the water meets the land. Since our historic collections, as you'll hear, cover activities both out at sea as well as those ashore. But today I'd like to begin by telling you a little story about a horse called Paddy. And when I first started working for Lloyds Register, or LR, more years ago than I care to remember, my manager Barbara Jones showed me a photo, and I remember thinking at the time, why is she showing me a picture of a horse? And you may well be thinking the same thing. I thought I was signing up to a webinar to hear about shipwrecks and things. Why is she showing us a picture of a horse? But this is no ordinary horse. Paddy was a very handsome dapple grey who won a number of competitions held in Hyde Park for the smartest turned out horse and van. And it's the van that is the key, as you can see here in this photograph. Paddy had a very important job to do, collecting and then returning register books to subscribers in London. And for me, it was Paddy who really first brought our history to life by joining up lots of threads of information and helping me to understand the bigger picture of what the registers are all about. This also got me thinking about the work of archaeologists and how all the pieces of information that you gather up are linked together to fit into a much larger story. So what are the register books, and what is Lloyds Register, and what does a horse have to do with it all? Well, I'll skim over this part quite quickly for those who may already tuned in to previous webinars. Lloyds Register was founded as the Society for the Registry of Shipping in 1760 in Lloyd's Coffee House, and you can hear all about that in my colleague Charlotte's webinar if you want to catch up on YouTube with that. In the 18th century, there was concern over the large losses of life and property at sea. Before Lloyd's Register, there was no way of knowing the quality of a ship. So the Society for the Registry of Shipping was founded so everyone with a commercial interest in the wooden ships sailing in and out of British ports from all around the world could have the best possible information on which to base their decisions. And LR inspected the vessels and rated or classed them according to their condition. And this was recorded in a register of ships. The oldest surviving copy dates from 1764, and it reveals the beginnings of ship classification. The quality of vessels was recorded using a system of class notations, which evolved over the years, with A1 being the most famous. At first, the register book was published intermittently, and then from 1775 annually. And it's a real treasure trove of information. Since the 1870s, LR has tried to include all merchant vessels of the world over 100 gross tonnes, which are self-propelled and seagoing, and that's regardless of their classification, so whether we inspected them or not. And before this time, only those vessels that we had looked at were listed. As you can imagine, publishing the register book and keeping it up to date was a huge task. Making amendments to current registers was known as posting, a service initially available on a weekly basis to London subscribers and later extended to subscribers who purchased 2 or more copies in other ports. In London, the register books were collected and returned to subscribers by the Society's messengers until the late 1880s, when a horse-drawn van was hired. Eventually, the Society acquired their own horse and van, and this practice continued until the last horse, our friend Paddy, retired in 1947. Now, why is this so important? Well, to furnish the subscribers with the latest information throughout the year, changes to vessels such as repairs, new names and owners, wrecks and so forth, Lloyd's Register needed a horse like Paddy to bring the books back. And it's these extra pieces of information that can also prove incredibly useful to researchers today, and of course, particularly to marine and nautical archaeologists trying to identify the wrecks and work out their story by tracing the technical details of types of vessel. So what do we have on shipwrecks? Well, early posted editions of the Lloyd's Register of Ships often include the fate of a vessel, the entry being stamped collision, foundered, condemned, and so on, sometimes with the month and the year. The key and the abbreviations are extensive, and they also show things like repairs. It's all of these little threads of information that we weave together which help to bring alive what at first may seem like a mundane list of ship names. By realising that the registers themselves were hard-working documents that needed to continually be amended to keep track of the constantly changing and moving vessels around the world, you can start to see why Paddy the horse was kept so busy. Many of the earliest register books are now available online with links from our website. And until lockdown, our brilliant digital archivist, Michael, was in the process of scanning in our own collection of register books to make sure that all of the information is easily accessible and searchable. We're also working to include supplements and appendices in the project to help complete the research picture in a way that has up until now only really been possible by consulting a full set of posted editions in person. Using our robotic scanner, Michael got as far as 1884, and these can now be searched on the Internet Archive. And if you want to see the robo-scanner in action, you can see that on our press release from August. Depending on the period that you're researching, you can find among the register book pages things like the place of build, the ship type, the rig, the classification, the shipbuilder, former names, dimensions, machinery, ship owners, master's name, and much, much more. And details of what was included and when can be found in our information sheet number 10 on our website. And I'll let you know where to find all the links to these resources I'm mentioning today at the end of the webinar. Supplements, mainly showing new additions and alterations to existing entries, were published within the register book from the very beginning and mailed out to subscribers outside of London. The Jubilee edition of 1884 contained particulars of over 15,000 ships, and the rapid expansion of LR's operations beyond the UK meant that a more comprehensive register book was needed. So from 1886, the Universal Register included all seagoing vessels in the world above 100 tonnes, irrespective of classification. This was a monumental work and very bulky, and it proved a bit hard to get into the robo-scanner as well. So from 1890, a separate appendix of supplementary information was published, containing things like shipbreakers, shipbuilders, signal letters and call signs, changes of name, dry and wet docks, and even a scale for anchor sizes. Lloyds Register has been testing anchors and chain cables since 1808, and from 1846 surveyors inspected them to ensure they were stamped as tested. Certificates of testing became essential as a condition of classification, and in 1857 tables were issued setting out the standard number and the weights of anchors and chain cables. Issued in 1862, some rules required the proper testing of chain cables at private proving houses licensed by the Board of Trade. You can see here we've got an extract from the Instructions to Exclusive Surveyors, which shows the procedure followed in the testing and marking of anchors and chain cables. So there's some really useful material tucked away where you might not expect to find it. And here you can see the location of a proving house, the Cable Testing House in Cardiff. This map of the Penarth Dock and Approaches 1872 is part of a website by a researcher known as Day the Rat, who is compiling a brilliant project to capture the heritage of the Penarth Docks. He's making the research free and accessible for all to use and creating an interactive resource which welcomes others' contributions. So we're pleased to be working in collaboration, as soon some of our survey reports will also be used on the site. So looking at some other useful maps and resources, one that proved extremely popular at the time and is still a hit with current day researchers is Jordan's Particulars of Docks, Wharves, Companies on the Thames. So in 1882, LR surveyor Charles Jordan compiled this in-depth map to allow him to better navigate the busy London shipyards. It was a massive success, prompting a second edition in 1904. Jordan remarked, "The favourable reception of the work by shipbuilders and steel manufacturers has been a great source of gratification. It contains 7 different maps of the Thames from London Bridge all the way out to Sea Reach in the Nore, and you can view digital editions of the maps on our website." The spread, the size and the changing locations of shipyard facilities around the world also reflects the changes in shipbuilding. Shipbuilding in wood was highly skilled, and in the UK, for example, the majority of the shipyards had been in the southern part of the country. They spread around river estuaries and the coast in Hampshire, the West Country, and in particular on the River Thames. Major shipbuilding ports were also established elsewhere, notably Aberdeen in Scotland and various ports in Wales. But the lack of easily available good quality timber hastened the move to iron shipbuilding, and this saw the move of shipbuilding to the north of the UK, notably the Clyde, the Tyne and the Wear, as it moved closer to the required raw materials, coal and iron ore. Shipbuilding itself moved from a craft to a heavy engineering industry. And if we look here at the particulars of dry and wet docks, they're a fascinating and incredibly useful resource. You can see here the register records facilities all around the world, and it's under the title of dry docks, floating docks, pontoons, patent slipways at all ports in the world. And here at Philadelphia, USA in 1884, you can see details of an iron shipbuilding yard, engine and boiler works, as well as a wooden shipbuilding yard. At Portland, Maine, the Marine Railway could take vessels of 1,000 tons, and at Savannah, Georgia, they had capabilities to lift vessels of 2,000 tons. Many of the expanding docks and pontoon facilities listed around the world note that the facilities were due to be lengthened or enlarged, reflective of the growing ship sizes at the time. And developments like this, they can be found throughout the material in our collections and in the technologies, innovation and changes to society that these records capture at both a local and a global level. So who are we? Well, the Heritage and Education Centre is a public-facing library and archive holding material concerning over 260 years of marine and engineering science and history. Our diverse collection contains much of interest to all kinds of people, covering maritime history, archaeology, genealogy, maritime art, and much, much more. And we're currently in the middle of a project to make the collections globally accessible to all. And as part of this, we're working to digitise as much of it as possible. The unique material held is that which has survived 3 culls of the archive in 1900, 1946 and 1968 to 84. So let's have a look at some of the types of document in the collection. So in addition to our main library and archive holdings, we've got the Lloyds Register Foundation Ship Plan and Survey Report collection from 1834 to circa 1960. It's an extensive collection with an estimated 1.25 million items, and in the majority of cases, it consists of a first and a last survey report for vessels, the last being for a ship that was disclassed by LR, or a report of its demise, so it would show its loss, wreck, or if it was broken up, and so on. And interesting or unusual survey reports were sometimes kept, like those where the ship was converted or had suffered major damage and subsequent repairs. This example is a report by surveyor Charles Jordan, and it reports that the bows from the collision bulkhead were cut right off, so you can see that highlighted there. We also have a fantastic collection that we call our First and Famous, which formed a pilot digitisation project completed in August 2016. The project team catalogued 112 ships that are significant in terms of design, technological advances, historic importance, or just ones that everyone's heard of, as well as some they may not, all LR classed. This also included things like the Fulligar, the first fully welded ocean-going ship, and she was classed with the note experimental. LR surveyors had a checklist of elements used in conjunction with the rules that they had to survey and judge in order to arrive at their recommended class to the committee. And their reports provide detailed information about repairs, trade, destined voyage, materials, and so on. And it's this richness that makes them unique. And this is why we're digitising them to share with you all. Lloyd's Register indicated in the 1860s that plans should be submitted, and we have very few prior to that. The plan collection evolves with changing draftsmanship and printing techniques. The early plans were all hand-drawn by shipyard draftsmen and often coloured using a watercolour. The individual plans range hugely in size and style. Some can be as large as 12 foot and others are on brittle tracing paper. Of special note within the collection are the vast number of boiler plans, retained due to problems with boilers in the early days. Steam power was crucial in the technological innovation of the 19th century, but there was, however, some danger associated with the steam propulsion of ships, as the boilers had a tendency to explode. Certificates were issued reflecting the condition of the engines and the boilers, and notations of MC, machinery certified, were published in the register book. From the 1870s, new engineer surveyors were instructed to also inspect piping arrangements and seacocks, which, if defective, could cause vessels to founder. Soon there were published rules governing the strength of boilers, which were welcomed by industry in general. So the initial method of surveying ships in the 18th century was not as well regulated as it later became. Surveyors based at 16 ports around the UK used their experience and judgment to assign class, and they followed no set rules. But from 1834, the Society was reconstituted as Lloyd's Register of British and Foreign Shipping, and rules for the classification of ships were published, based on extensive research, and a revised system of classification was adopted based on age, quality of materials used, the state of repair, and whether the vessel had been under survey when she was built. The new rules stated that a careful survey will be required to be made annually or on the return from every foreign voyage by the surveyors to this society. The surveyors, in their reports to the committee, recorded details like the actual condition of the decks, bends and topsides, particularly in the way of the deck fastenings, timber plank and tree nails. The 1837 rules and regulations for the classification of ships set a precedent for standards of shipbuilding by including tables for the different types of wood used and the required scantlings, so that's the dimensions of the structural parts of the vessel. And this makes them an invaluable resource for archaeologists wanting to distinguish different vessel types. All of these written survey reports had to be submitted to the new governing body of Lloyds Register from 1834, and luckily for anyone doing research, all of this activity generated a wealth of material. And of particular note are the suggested rules for composite ships, which were issued in 1868. And here you can see Harry Cornish's winning illustration for a competition to illustrate them in 1866. Research, discussion and amendment of existing rules, as well as formulating new rules, have always been a very important part of the organisation's work and continues to be an integral part today. In the mid-19th century, new rules for discussion would be drawn by hand, and documents in the archive collection that are exemplars of new technology, such as the composite ships, reveal not only the evolution in shipbuilding technology, but also the ongoing research into methods and procedures that LR utilised to engage with new innovations and ensure that they were safe. The composite clippers were a new design, ships built of an iron frame with wooden planking. They showcased elegant lines and new technology with wire rigging and steam winches. The most famous example is, of course, the Cutty Sark at Greenwich, London, but perhaps a lesser known example survives elsewhere, deliberately beached to reinforce a tidal riverbank in Gloucestershire. Many of you will have heard of the Purton Hulks, the largest ship's graveyard in mainland Britain. It contains some unique examples of vessels beached beside the River Severn between 1909 and about 1965 in order to reinforce the bank and stop the river from encroaching on the Sharpness Canal. Today the hulks are in a state of considerable decay. The site falls between areas of legal protection, and as a result, the Friends of Purton, a dedicated group of individuals, formed with a quest to secure the archaeological remains. They engage in a programme of archaeological surveying, photography, and recording of each vessel, and this is supported by an in-depth historical review, much of which is reproduced on the Friends of Purton website, which I recommend looking at. I've been fortunate enough to visit the Purton Hulks, both as a student with Stroud College of Art and Design, and latterly to take part in a tour guided by local historian Paul Barnett. And this in turn led to our discussions over the composite ship rules in our collections, which I was able to share with him for research. And these will soon be available as a resource on our site through our new historic rules pages. We also hold the manuscript sources, reports of classed vessels lost 1892 to 1940, and these are also known as the Wreck Report series. It includes shipwreck, war loss and demolitions. And our archivist Max and the team at Woolwich have come across some very interesting finds. A story that typifies the kind of document in the series is the Eugene Otras. In June 1926, the secretary received a letter from the surveyor at Barcelona that the vessel was now a total wreck. The wreck report shows that on the 26th of April, Eugenie Otras ran aground in fog on the rocks off La Cabosse near Tarifa. Quickly refloated, she was beached to prevent her sinking, where major leaks had been spotted in her engine room. There had been no loss of life, but despite fervent attempts to salvage her 4,000-ton cargo of coal, she was eventually designated a total loss. This official wreck report account, complete with newspaper clippings, formed the final record for vessels before their name was expunged or removed from the register book. And unusually, Eugene Otras' record also comes with an additional detail showing her loss, this rather unfortunate photograph of her demise. This series also features some interesting items that are special and unexpected for different reasons, like this German postcard sent from Hamburg to London in 1923 to notify Ella that the Luftmoor had been broken up and could be expunged from the register book. What makes this postcard particularly unusual is its context. Sent at the height of German hyperinflation, it needed 6 stamps at a cost of 450,000 marks. As the cost of the stamps rose faster than they could be printed, new prices were stamped over the old ones. By the end of the period, $1 was worth about 4.21 trillion German marks. So a big thank you to Max and the team for digging these exciting finds out for us today. And the Rec Report series, amounting to some 83 volumes, has almost been completely digitised, and it will be made available as a free resource on our HEC website very soon. So please do sign up for our monthly newsletter to hear when they're released. Another source for the period from 1940 to 1977 are the Unpublished Rec Books. These gave much more detailed information on total losses and also on casualties that became total losses. The published casualty returns were compiled from these rec books, and between 1940 and 45, a system of reference codes links our library copies of the posted editions of the Lloyds Register of Ships to the rec books, wherever a ship was lost and whatever the cause. Within this series, we have records of famous tragedies, and here you can see the entry for the HMT Lancastria, requisitioned by the British government during the Second World War and sunk on the 17th of June 1940 during an air raid at St Nazaire. And this remains the largest single loss of life in British maritime history. Another free resource you can already access on our website are the Lloyds Register casualty returns. These refer to the total losses of ocean-going merchant ships over 100 gross tons, and they were published quarterly and annually from 1890. You might expect that these would relate to lives lost at sea, but the returns record ship losses by flag and by cause of loss. Later editions also show the year of build, the ship type, and from 1970 world maps with the position of ships that were founded, burnt, wrecked, and lost by collision. So next, I'd like to give you an example from some of our collaborative projects to highlight how the collections are being used. So making the link, Lloyds Register and the National Monuments Record of Wales. This project will enhance the National Monuments shipwreck records by linking individual ships in our online HEC collections, so from the casualty returns. They use Coughlin, the online database, and it contains details of many thousands of archaeological sites, monuments, buildings, maritime sites, and an index to drawings, manuscripts, and photographs in their archive. And the details of the wreck of the iron-hulled steamship Doon were recorded in the Lloyds Register Casualty Return 1903, as you can see in this example. And this will be linked to directly from the Coughlin site, which already maps the location of the loss, along with other known information from their archive. The Royal Commission itself is a statutory body for maritime development in Welsh waters, so ensuring that these new links will also be available to the developers and to the planners who rely upon their data. Interestingly, the site description on Coughlin notes that archaeological remains associated with the loss of this vessel are not confirmed at present at this location, but may be in the vicinity. So this is one to look out for if you are in the area. As the Doon was classed by Lloyds Register and some of her records have survived, you can now for the first time add another layer of detail from our digitised collection. Here you can see an examination for annual survey held at Ayr in January 1886. In it, the surveyor remarks that the inside stroke of port bilge is considerably buckled as a consequence of the vessel having to be berthed, with that side next to the quay. A recommendation was made to the owner to have the strake faired and doubled amidship. The strake is a course or a row of shell, deck, bulkhead or other plating, and this repair information provides an extra level of detail to potentially help identify the wreck should her remains ever be found. It also paints a picture of a hard-working coasting vessel and the detail with which surveys were conducted for vessels to remain in class. Now, a key source that has enhanced many people's research over the years is the Shipwreck Index of the British Isles and Ireland, started by Richard and Bridget Larne in the 1970s. The index represents a unique archive and a lifetime of research, and Lloyds Register and LR Fairplay published volumes of the work from 1995, 6 volumes in total. You can see here the entry for the Doon. At the time of her loss in 1903, she was owned by the Ayr Steamship Company and registered at Glasgow. She was carrying bottled beer, empty beer cases and limestone when she went ashore on Llandoulas Beach during an easterly gale. And this differs from the Shipwreck Index of the UK Hydrographic Office, which mainly covers hazardous obstructions to shipping, so it's a much more detailed archive in this case. And the entire content of Larne's 6 published volumes has now been integrated into an electronic version with an almost instant mapping capability. This content has been extended and improved over many years to produce the current Shipwrecks UK resource. And here you can see an example of one of the many new search parameters where the contributory cause for the wreck event was fog. Another snippet here illustrates salt cargo wrecks with the voyage origin St. Ubes, Portugal, showing the global nature of the trade and the data, just in these 2 little snapshots so you can see the potential of the resource. It records every known shipping loss around the coast of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. The search capabilities go far beyond what is possible using the printed version, and it provides a fascinating microcosm of our maritime heritage. As Alan Jones of Shipwrecks UK says, it's important that we document the never-ceasing losses of lives and ships in a way which can lead to a proper appreciation. And thank you to Alan for all of the information he's contributed for this talk today. Another of our project partners are the Museum of London Archaeology's award-winning Citizen team. The coastal and intertidal zone archaeological network are helping us to widen access and inform best use of our archive and resources through a programme of citizen science, public outreach, higher education opportunities and professional development. By integrating the HEC collections, Citizen are adding more detail to their research to extend its scope and to enhance the appeal and relevance for wider audiences. During the next 3 years, the project will greatly improve our route to impact by building collaborations with new audiences like coastal landholders, statutory bodies and diverse local communities. Raising awareness of maritime heritage threatened by coastal erosion and encouraging new avenues of research into the results of fieldwork. And you can look out for their virtual low tide trials on the Citizen website and also check out the Armchair Archaeology blog, which is where they explain that archaeology isn't just about excavation. Research is one of the great contributions that volunteers make when they're not on the foreshore. A key part of the archaeology sector are desk-based assessments, or DBAs, reports that provide initial information on archaeology that may be affected by planned development works. But as the blog rightly highlights, anyone can look into their local history and archaeology. And thankfully, due to the joys of the internet, anyone can now look into the history of a much wider geographic area than has previously been possible, all from the comfort of your own home. The Nautical Archaeology Society are also running some great online content and workshops to help people to explore different resources, so do be sure to look out for those. Now, today I've skimmed through much of what we have in our physical collections to focus more on what is already available online. We also hold things like the Lloyds Register of Yachts, as well as a plethora of other material, from committee minutes and letter books to treatises on naval architecture. And here's one of my favourites in the collection, the Little Sea Torch, translated by John Serres. This was produced as a guide for coasting pilots, and the beautiful illustrations show how to navigate along the coasts of England, Ireland, France, Italy, and even further afield. It's enriched with over 100 headlands and lighthouses, together with plans of the principal harbours. The Heritage and Education Centre is closed, not only for the current global pandemic, but also for a planned refurbishment throughout the rest of the year. So things like our lovely book collection are currently tucked safely away. But when we do reopen, we have many more treasures to share with you, such as our specialist shipwreck section of reference books, which we hope to welcome you to delve into before too long. Now, before I finish, I thought it would be helpful to also summarise quickly what we do not have. We're not the Lloyds Marine Collection, who hold information on marine casualties and shipping movements worldwide back to circa 1740. Their collection includes Lloyd's List, which provides a daily record of information on shipping casualties. As Lloyd's of London intelligence network grew, this source became increasingly comprehensive for shipping losses worldwide, and a variety of indexes and further information are available from the Guildhall Library. We do not hold passenger lists, hydrographic charts, insurance or customs records, or the Lutein Bell. And researchers should also note that the Lloyd's Register of Ships is not an official record of the registration of ships. Today, registration is a requirement of international maritime law, and the official British Registration Authority is the Maritime Coastguard Agency. We do, of course, have lots of wonderful things that can help you, and where we cannot, we've compiled a collection of information sheets on our site to help refer you to the right organisation. So to conclude, all these remnants of maritime culture on land, as well as underwater, the pieces of rust that in an envelope that our archivist finds tucked there by a surveyor many moons ago, intriguing wrecks along the foreshore, and the striking solidity of a surviving dry dock. All of these things, when joined together, form a wonderful and colourful story of our global maritime and industrial heritage. And through this webinar, I hope that I've highlighted to you the richness and diversity of our collections, their relevance to a global audience, and also the potential for future research and collaborative projects. My particular area of interest is learning from the past and exploring how we can use lessons from our heritage to help make the world a safer place. And if you'd like to find out more about working with us, please do get in touch. We're also sending around a short feedback survey, which it would be great if you could fill out for us after the talk, please. And I mentioned further resources. There's a new page on our site. So if you go to the Foundation website under Archive and Library and Research, you'll see a list of resources which is constantly being added to there. And I'm happy now to take any questions if you have any. Let's see. Please make the slide. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, Charlotte, do we have any questions on here? I can't see any that have come through.
No, it doesn't look like there are any questions on the tab. If anyone does have any questions, please do drop them into the questions drop down bit. Oh, there we go. One question has just popped up.
Okay, let's see if I can spot that. Could you read it out to me, Charlotte? I'm having trouble seeing it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank
So
you.
the first question that's come in says, thank you for the talk, Louise. Could you just clarify what the Lloyd's list was again?
Okay, so it's a list of shipping intelligence that was compiled initially by Edward Lloyds. He started it as an information list compiling all of the things that he heard in the coffee house, and it's Lloyds of London publication, and it's shipping intelligence from around the world. So initially it would be information on maritime events and casualty that was sort of arriving in London as the information filtered through, and then gradually as it evolved it became a much more comprehensive resource of worldwide shipping incidents. And Lloyds of London had a very extensive shipping intelligence network which started to feed all of this information back into them, and you can find indexes to the historical volumes at the Guildhall Library.
Great, thank you, Louise. So the next question says, hi Louise, as you guys are closed for the foreseeable future, are you still able to provide survey plans, etc., associated with the register entries to researchers who might request them?
It's a bit of a mixed answer. Where they've survived and where they've been digitised. So it's not quite a needle in a haystack, but you need to start by obviously seeing if the vessel was classed by Lloyd's Register and if it falls into a certain time period. And then if the material survived the 3 culls of the archive, which I mentioned, we may well have it. But the best thing to do is just to do a general search on our website for the ship name, and it will bring up the records if they've been digitised and made available yet.
Cool. Next question, how do I obtain a copy of a survey report?
So if you want a copy of a survey report, they're freely downloadable from our website, the ones which are digitised so far. We're partway through the project, so there's many more to come. If you require one of a higher resolution for whatever reason, you just need to get in touch with us with a bit more information, and we can provide a higher res. But for most things, you know, most uses, the ones you can download yourself from the website should be absolutely fine. And you just go to the archive and library tab, and then down through the digital resources, you can see we've got the lists of the register of ships online. So if you took that as your starting point to find out whether the ship was classed by Lloyd's Register, and if it was, you might be in luck. And then you can also go to the little search icon again on the website and download the survey report if it's on the website.
Great, thank you. Next one, many thanks for an excellent presentation. Is it possible to get a recording of the presentation?
Yes, it will be. We're uploading the recordings to our YouTube channel, so we can share details of that. And you can also, if you go to the What's On pages of our website, you can see previous recordings listed under webinars on there. So you can, for example, have a look at Charlotte's brilliant webinar on the coffee houses, which is already accessible.
Great. Next question. Is there an index of vessel names in Lloyd's Register, or is it a case of looking through individual registers?
It's usually a case of looking through the individual registers, so you need to have an idea really of when the vessel was around, and then within the register of ships they're listed alphabetically, but the ship would only appear in the vessel. The ship would only be listed in a register of ships while it was still a current vessel.
Cool. Next question. Are there many manuscript additions to the register entries that are not printed onto the registers, e.g. additional lost information?
What we found when we looked at the earliest register of ships, so the 1764 edition, because in our library we were using some sort of facsimile copies, where they're in black and white, you often can't see the handwritten annotations because they were written in red at the time. So what we've done is we've had those individually photographed so that you can actually see handwritten annotations as they were added at the time. As you get later through, they were stamped in, so the posting house would add information as it came through. So say if there was a collision in the right hand column, they would stamp what had happened, whether it was a collision or a loss or a wreck. And the best way to determine that information is to look in the key at the beginning of the register book, and that will tell you where to look for that type of information and if it was recorded. The other place that's really useful is looking at our information sheets, numbers 10 and 34 and 44. They all help you to investigate the earlier register books.
Great, thank you. Next question. I'm interested in the history of Lloyd's Register. Are there any books on this subject?
There are, yes. There's a very brief information sheet 31 on the website if you want a quick read. We also produced the fourth history of the organisation, which was called Lloyd's Register 250 Years of Service. That was celebrating our anniversary in 2010. It's sometimes pops up on eBay and various places, but we're hoping to make the text of that available online in the future. If you browse through our website as well, we're also adding more and more content about the history of Lloyd's Register as well. And there's already one which you can see on the screen under digital resources. Maritime Science and Technology, Changing Our World is an online version of another publication which touches on a lot of the history of Lloyd's Register as well.
Great, and this is a comment rather than a question, but it said, thank you. Many thanks for an interesting talk and also for your collective efforts to make additional digitisation resources available. Can I add that Shipwrecks UK is aiming for every recorded loss, but this is a goal rather than the current reality?
Yes, it's a very good goal to have. Thank you.
So those are all the questions I can see that have come into us. If anyone has any others, do send me an email. I'm Charlotte, and the email that's the one that's kind of been sent out to you with all the information before. But otherwise, thank you very, very much for that, Louise. That was really, really interesting and a really, really great insight into our collection. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to be doing another webinar at the end of July, and it will be with my colleague Sean, and we'll be talking about football and its association with shipyards and shipbuilding. So again, in a follow-up email where we'll ask you to fill out a survey, there will be a link to sign up for that webinar as well. So thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks everyone. Bye. Thanks, Charlotte.